My name's Hailey, coming to you with the news of the Vietnam War.
And I'm Annie.
Hi, I'm Ryan, and I'm an expert on the Vietnam War.
Hi, I'm Anna, and I am also an expert on the Vietnam War.
So how long did the war last?
It lasted for 30 years.
It was the longest war that the United States has ever been involved in.
Who was involved in the Vietnam War?
France invaded Vietnam as well as Japan. The United States helped the French in Vietnam at times of the war as well.
Wow, that's interesting. Were there any U.S. leaders involved?
Yes, there were actually. The U.S. President at the time, Harry S. Truman, was also involved.
What happened in the Vietnam War?
It all started when the France ignored Ho Chi Minh request at the Versailles Peace Conference in 1919.
Well, you know, the Versailles Conference. Remember, Ho Chi Minh was the founder of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. France ignored these requests. Many nationalist and communist groups formed in Vietnam, including the Vietnamese Nationalist Party and Indochinese Communist Party.
After that, Japan went and occupied Vietnam for a few years during World War II from 1940 to 1945. This gave Vietnam and Ho Chi Minh a chance to build up the nationalist force.
How did Japan obtain power over Vietnam when France was already there?
France fell to Germany during World War II.
Therefore, giving Japan the chance to invade Vietnam.
Anyway, the Japanese invasion gave Vietnam and Ho Chi Minh a chance to build up the nationalist force.
Ho Chi Minh saw this as an opportunity to open up the Viet Minh, which represented a league for Vietnamese independence.
Was anyone else involved in this situation?
Yes, the Americans were convinced by Viet Minh to supply Vietnam with weapons to fight the Japanese.
The U.S. had already disliked Japan due to World War II. The Vietnamese general Vo Nguyen Giap used his master guerrilla tactics successfully to fight against the Japanese as well.
Then what happened? Did Japan continue occupying Vietnam?
Luckily, the Viet Minh successfully expanded and helped the peasants during the war famine, winning popularity by all the Vietnamese people. The Viet Minh successfully conquered Hanoi against the Japanese in the August Revolution in 1945.
Bao Dai abdicated and the Japanese surrendered, ending World War II.
What is your name and what is your relationship to the Vietnam? Did you grow up in Vietnam? Tell us about your experience.
Chiến thắng chính thị hứng thầu, tổng chiến thắng thắng chống thầu, những thi hành chiến thầu hồi sinh mới đầu, thắng chiến thắng tổng sôi đầu, chiến thắng chiến đấu đủ.
I remember being called to war. I was excited to fight for my country, to show honor to my family. I came back from the war a changed person and a different man. My perspective on the world was totally different. I knew that there were some evil in the world. I remember fighting. I had killed one white man. I tried to convince myself that it was for my country and that I was doing the right thing. But I just remember feeling so guilty. I remember waking up and thinking that I might not come back alive from the battlefield. The battlefield was crazy. Soldiers everywhere with big weapons and guns and smoke. Smoke filled the air. It was hard. I wanted to fight for my country, Vietnam. It means everything to me, and I am so lucky I'm alive today.
Thank you, Ching Hua. What happened after Japan left Vietnam?
And after Vietnam no longer had a leader.
Ho Chi Minh finally declared Vietnam an independent country.
He now called Vietnam the Democratic Republic of Vietnam,
Also known as DRV.
The French refused to recognize the DRV, and the French forces came back to Vietnam in 1946 and drove Viet Minh to the north of Vietnam.
Yes, however, the French were unable to push the Viet Minh any further.
Ho Chi Minh sought out recognition from Harry S. Truman, the current president of the United States at the time.
The first American troops in Vietnam were identified as military advisors. The identification was false, but then, so were almost all of the official explanations of America's presence in Vietnam.
What did the U.S. say to his request?
The United States rejected his request because they feared communism spreading more.
The U.S. helped the French and began transporting troops to them.
This later became known as Indochina War.
Wow. So basically, Vietnam War?
Who would have thought?
Fighting broke out, of course, between the French and the Viet Minh forces.
The French also set up a rival government in South Vietnam.
Who is the leader of the South?
The French put Bao Dai back on the throne.
But he wasn't so much a leader, he was kind of more of a figurehead.
How long did the war last?
The Indochina War ended in 1954 after the Battle of Dien Bien Phu.
In 1975, two wars were fought on the sliver of Southeast Asian coastline known as Vietnam. The first war was a struggle between Vietnamese nationalists and the French colonial regime. That ended in 1954, with Vietnam split between the Communist North and the pro-Western South. In the second conflict, known as the Vietnam War, the United States replaced France as the chief Western power arrayed against the communist regime of the North, headed by Ho Chi Minh.
What happened at the end of the Battle of Dien Bien Phu?
The French built a large central base in Dien Bien Phu, which was surrounded by 3 artillery bases.
This central base created by the French was a strategy to lure in the Viet Minh.
Did it work?
Yes, it did.
The Viet Minh did attack as expected. However, the Vietnamese commander, General Vo Nguyen Glap, knew the French plan.
General Vo Nguyen Glap created a plan to defeat the French. He had a Vietnamese low-class peasants carry artillery guns up into the mountains surrounding Dien Bien Phu.
The Viet Minh forces reassembled the artillery guns within the mountains, using them to destroy the central base.
General Glap launched his plan in 1954 with thousands of his troops at Dien Bien Phu.
That sounds like a very dangerous plan.
I guess it is good that the Vietnamese won, though.
I guess.
How many deaths were there, though?
There were many casualties.
Sometimes more Vietnamese soldiers died than the French soldiers. However, this battle drove the French away from Vietnam.
What happened after the French finally left Vietnam?
The French organized the Geneva Conference in 1954, after the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. At the conference, diplomats from all over the world decided to split Vietnam officially.
They decided to split Vietnam, where North Vietnam was controlled by the communists and South Vietnam was the anti-communist.
Did Vietnam ever want to reunite?
They were supposed to be a Geneva conference when Vietnam would be reunited.
However, this conference never took place.
The Americans would prevent communism from spreading.
Ho Chi Minh organized the Viet Cong in an attempt to reunite Vietnam.
The war resulted in millions of soldiers and civilians killed and injured. Well, that's it for today. Again, I'm Hailey.
And I'm Annie, and thank you for joining us today to learn about the Vietnam War.